everyone. My name is Dusanka Lecic. I'm from Serbia, test developer in Dutch company Levi9 IT Services. Our delivery centers are in 3 countries, Romania, Ukraine and Serbia. I work in a small town. Today presentation is mobile testing with Appium. I'm not a mobile tester. That is a first thing about myself. But I had an assignment last year on Icelandic project, Arion Banki client, to do the setup and tests, automation tests for them, for mobile devices. So from that situation and assignment that accomplished successfully, I was actually involved in mobile testing also in some other projects in my company. Today's agenda is, like you see, something about mobile testing, about tools, about Appium, automation tests in Appium, and what are the advantages and disadvantages, how to avoid some pitfalls, and of course some short conclusions from this short story. This is only my experience, which is not so big in mobile testing, but was very interesting for me to discover new things and learn about automation mobile testing. So what is exactly mobile testing? That is a process by which application software developed for mobile devices is tested for functionality, for usability, consistency. That is very important for us. We can do it on manually, and we can also do it like automation. We have various types of mobile testing. The first and probably for the most of the testers important is functional testing. And we cover all functionalities like that. I must say that there are a few more types, like security testing for mobile. Also performance testing, what is going on when we have a low battery, for example. That is very interesting for us, performance testing in mobile. And we have some typical mobile testing types, like installation testing, when we want to check if we can install, deinstall, or update our application. So we have some more types like interrupt testing and usability. That is also very important because some devices are very small and the user must manage easily with the application. And we can talk about key challenges. For me, first key challenge is testing method. Do we use like real device or we use emulator? It is a big difference because in emulator we can find some things like bugs, and on real device we cannot find that. So my recommendation is to use real device if it is possible. So our application must be downloadable for us, for users. Also some key challenges are we have diversity in mobile platforms. We have some compatibility, like on higher resolution, everything is fine, everything is working, but on some lower resolution, not all, nothing is fine, nothing is going on correctly. Also we have one big thing and very important for us, and that's it, device availability. If we can test that on a certain device and we are expecting something from client, like specification for testing, certain devices to cover, and certain platform like or Android or iOS, and that is very important for us to get, but sometimes we cannot get also the device. So we have also different mobile testing tools, like Ranorex, like Calabash, also Appium, I used it. We have Selendroid, we have what? Yes, also I didn't work with it, but a lot of tools and a lot of different frameworks. But my choice for the first time was Appium. Why Appium? Probably because a lot of tools, and I choose Appium. Why Appium? Because it is open source tool and supports a lot of a lot of different programming languages, which is I think very important for us. It supports like Ruby, Python, Java, C#, JavaScript, of course, a lot of frameworks, and that is the main reason that I choose it for the first time. I didn't know much about it, but I researched and started to work with. How does Appium work? We have one machine in which we are running WebDriver scripts, and that machine is communicating with Appium server through the HTTP or JSON, and then actually Appium receives or sends some commands to devices or emulator, of course. So Appium is a tool that supports two platforms, iOS and Android, and that is also a good thing in it. And of course, how to set up it. It is not an easy process, but mobile testing is also hardest process. So we must install as a first Java SDK, Android SDK, Visual Studio SDK, a lot of installation on a start. Also Node.js, and we must install, of course, Appium. So after all that installation, my choice was C# and some internal framework that is made by my company and our testers called NetCell. And after that, we must, of course, set up the environment variables, and that's our like Android home and Java home. We must set up also paths for that variables, and Java home must point it at Java SDK bin folder, and Android home must be pointed at Android SDK folder. So after that, we are something like ready, but not exactly for 100%, because we need some simulator, emulator to use. My choice was Android Studio For this project, I used it, so we must install it and choose API level that is correct for our device. And of course, run it after downloading and installation process. We run also Appium, and we must setting up some things in Appium server. So like device name, if we do not know, we can find out from Android SDK folder in command prompt. So we must choose also some other things like to use browser if we want to. My company is doing with web applications, so that was my choice. And after all that settings, we actually then can start Visual Studio and create a unit project, unit testing project in Visual Studio, and start to write testing methods. So for tests, I used NetCell. You will see one example of a simple, very simple test, like open the application and click login button to go to login page. It's pretty much simple, but we made some excellent tests in NetCell, which is the framework for mobile, but also for web testing. What are the limitations of Appium? And some most common issues that I find out through the project. It is enabling to remote server. Then we must check our settings and make sure that everything is correct. Also, IP address must be correct entered. We can also also have problems with new connection creation, and every time when that happens to us, we can simply check all settings in Appium server. That is first place that we must check and correct if something is wrong. Also, sometimes it is necessary to restart Appium server. Happens a lot sometimes. And also we have some problems with finding devices, especially for in the beginning. And we must sure that emulator or device is running at all and is it compatible with Appium server and Appium. Compatibility is the most, I think, important thing in all setup. So we can also talk about limitations of Appium. I think the most of you who worked with mobile testing will agree that setup is very heavy, and for iOS I think heavier than for Android. Also I found a problem with image comparison. Long time to configure, and I think it is better for smaller projects, not for big one. But also some advantages are, this is just one screen of Appium server and host and port. And when I talk, I will let you to see one simple example in NetCell. Some advantages is Appium is for both platforms, Android and iOS. That is very important to make simple setup for both projects. Also supports CI, that is very important, like Jenkins, Source Labs. Also supporting Selenium Grid. I worked with it. Doesn't require access to our code. That is also very important sometimes. And supporting different frameworks. I tried our framework and succeeded in it. Some pitfalls. I had a lot of problems with missing IDs. That is on developers, but we need IDs actually for mobile testing. It's much easier and we have less problems with mobile testing. That is the first thing that I actually saw in my work with mobile testing with Appium. Also, sometimes developers forget about application view states. That is very important when developing, to think about it all the time, because mobile testing is very special type of testing. And sometimes people think that mobile tool Appium is too slow, but it isn't too slow. It's like technologies it relies on are sometimes slow, and we have then problems. So my advice for mobile testing is just to use Appium for smaller projects, and except that the future, I think, asks from us, from testers today, to get known in a lot of technologies, to change it from project to project. And I think our growth as a tester is to get known with mobile testing, also to get known for technologies about it. So that's it from me. This is a small example, but very simple. So if